All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our webinar for admissions, advising, and career services staff, supporting undergraduate pathways in the humanities. We're really excited to have all of you here and appreciate you taking the time to join us to talk about this important issue. I'm Scott Muir, Director of Undergraduate Initiatives at the National Humanities Alliance. We're going to have three parts of our presentation today. And there will be opportunity for feedback and interaction via a tool that we will be using called Pigeonhole that we will share at the appropriate time. We also invite you to ask questions at any moment in the presentation, and we will pause a couple of times to field those questions as they arise. So the three parts, we will begin with an overview of who we are and our work on undergraduate recruitment in the humanities. To give you some background. We will then share some resources that we've developed for making the case for studying the humanities as an undergraduate, specifically that take on the students' career concerns and the widespread myths about humanities majors' career prospects head on. And we'll pause to give you an opportunity to share some feedback and ideas about further resources that we can develop. And then we will share models that we've identified through our research on undergraduate recruitment for cultivating collaboration among humanities faculty and administrators, admissions, advising, and career services staff. So National Humanities Alliance is a member-supported advocacy organization dedicated to promoting the value of the humanities on campuses, in communities, and on Capitol Hill. So we will be sharing our work on undergraduate education, but we are also the representative for funding for the humanities in the federal budget through the National Endowment for Humanities and other important programs. So we began researching undergraduate humanities recruitment in 2017 when it became clear that the declines in the wake of the Great Recession of 2008 in humanities enrollments and majors were not a blip, but were a sustained trend that was threatening the health of undergraduate humanities education. And so we began collecting data to assess what is working to attract more students to the humanities in a challenging environment. And we also have been surveying students engaged in innovative initiatives about how this is impacting their perceptions of the humanities. So we'll be sharing more specifics on that as we go along. First, I just wanted to look at this figure, and it's important to interpret this graph. These are not raw figures. As you see on the left-hand column, this is a kind of an odd calculation of share relative to the peak for all of these humanities majors as a percentage of all bachelor's degrees awarded in the United States. And so what you see here is a clear pattern across basically all humanities disciplines, where there was a peak reached for most of these disciplines somewhere between 2000 and 2010, and then a steady decline, again, not necessarily always in raw figures, but as a percentage of all degrees awarded since 2010, as the effects of the Great Recession really began to change students' calculus about what they were studying. And the first thing we did was we surveyed 400 faculty administrators in the humanities at institutions across the country about what they perceive to be the challenges in attracting students to the humanities in this moment. And as you can see, there was a clear consensus that student concerns about job prospects were the primary deterrent to studying humanities. And you also see lower down the list some related factors like discouragement from parents and other influences, often based on these job concerns, debt driving students to maximize immediate return on investment, as well as a few other factors. And one thing to note is, again, there was a great deal of institutional diversity in this sample, and this was a pattern that was clear and consistent across all institution types, and was actually, if anything, more acute at some of the institutions sort of at the top of the hierarchy, if you will. Discouragement from parents and other influences also relevant to our conversation, and was, again, one that was consistent across institutions, except, again, a little bit even more acute at research universities, private institutions, and liberal arts colleges, traditionally the bastion for the humanities and other liberal arts pursuits. We also asked about the audiences that faculty administrators were engaging to try to attract students to the humanities. And what I want to focus on here is this, what we call the bridging audiences. And my apologies that we did not ask about advising in this survey, mainly because we assumed that that was a group that would faculty were working with regularly. I now see that as an oversight. But what you see here is, there's these obvious internal audiences that folks are generally engaging. There's these kind of more distant external audiences. And then, we framed career services and admissions in this case as bridging audiences on campus that can help with this effort. And what we saw was that, about half of faculty and administrators said that they were engaging with career services or admissions in some form, but a quarter sort of acknowledging that they weren't, but that they would like to. And the qualitative also showed that sometimes this engagement was not particularly deep. Then there were examples that were deep, which we'll get to at the end of our presentation. I'll also share that faculty frequently shared in the qualitative questions about additional challenges that they experienced in recruiting students to the humanities, that they felt that they were being given short shrift. So I'll put this with the caveat of, we're probably all likely familiar that many faculty are prone to complain. So I'm not taking this as fact as so much as a perception. But in terms of admissions, this was a very common comment that admissions, the perception from humanities faculty that admissions feel more comfortable talking about profession-focused majors, and also less confident sort of speaking about the specific humanities programs and their value, and so therefore sort of only maybe referring to them in passing. I'm going to read this quote about advising, which I think is pretty rich and pretty nuanced. So this person wrote that to avoid lengthening time to degree, our centralized advising office strongly discourages students from changing majors. But in the past, many humanities majors began as something viewed as more practical until they realized they had a passion for history, literature, or philosophy. In addition, the training advisors receive and the prescribed pathways they offer to students rarely lead them to suggesting that students select majors in the humanities. And hopefully something that comes through is that this respondent, there was also other parts of this response that really indicated that they really understood the retention goals that centralized advising was pursuing and why, but that they also saw that there was maybe other ways that students were not always helped. The students who would like to gravitate towards these areas of studies, that this wasn't always helpful in encouraging them to do so. And then this last quote from Career Services, it's ultimately a positive comment on a collaboration that was formed, but also implies that what we have often heard is folks feeling like they're kind of left out of the tradition, whether that's true or not, the traditional employment connections that are made for students. The humanities majors are not always thought of as a prime candidate for these types of positions. So the real payoff of this research was identifying things that were succeeding and documenting them. And there was a couple broad patterns across the 100 or so initiatives that we featured in this report. Cassie, could you share the link to that report? Thank you. So addressing concerns about job prospects through the curriculum and co-curriculum came through as a differentiator between humanities programs that were able to grow and those that were experiencing decline. And we talk about this playing offense rather than defense. So they weren't just taking this question on, but rather than getting sort of defensive in the face or of these trends or critical of them, really making a confident case for that they had a lot to offer their students for their own professional development, as well as their personal and intellectual development. This goes hand in hand with innovating curricula that highlight skills and apply the humanities to major issues and challenges of importance to students, like climate change, that really show them how this is connected to issues they care about and jobs they might pursue. The other trend that's a little bit different, but just especially in this post-COVID moment, although we're not really post, but in the wake of the lockdowns, promoting humanities education and experiences of community that students are hungry for. So there's just simply types of intellectual community that can be achieved in humanities class sizes that are not achievable in a large lecture course in an introductory science class or business class. And so students are hungry for those types of experiences. And so really advertising them and promoting them in ways that students can get excited about and that tap into their aspirations, so that connect those types of experiences of intellectual community to them becoming empowered to make the kinds of change and pursue the kinds of goals that they want to pursue in their lives. More specifically for this presentation, we really emphasized in the report the things we heard about folks who were able to collaborate in successful ways. So working with admissions to promote humanities offerings to prospective students, equipping advisors with resources to help them articulate how humanities courses and majors help students succeed, and collaborating with career services to address concerns about job prospects and support strong postgraduate transitions. And a common theme of all this was that for these to be mutual beneficial partnerships, faculty and staff need to recognize that they both have something to learn from one another and really respect the expertise that each is bringing to the table and see how they can really benefit from gleaning some of that from their colleagues. We also, as we've been doing this work, have been surveying students who were engaged in these innovative initiatives in the humanities. So we're asking students how it changes their perception of what the humanities can do for them. So, and also about how it maybe makes them want to take more courses in the humanities. So the data that we gather in this way helps demonstrate how faculty and administrators can better show how humanities knowledge and skills can be applied to different professions, to different challenges and issues that are important to students. And in doing so, we're nudging humanities faculty and administrators to adapt to the realities we just discussed in terms of the challenging environment for the humanities, and really take that seriously and be willing to change the way they're doing what they're doing and teach differently and meet students where they are. So I'm going to share one example of this kind of a project that we worked on. So this is the High Impact Humanities Initiative at UMass Boston. And the goal of this project was to develop new courses that would be engaging, both through community engagement and also connecting the humanities to careers, and also just timely topics of interest to students. And so what they did to do this was basically build structures that brought faculty together to think about how to really meet students more where they are in creating new courses, to create those courses together, support one another in doing that. Importantly, to push all those courses through gen ed approval in a rapid time frame. And so the result was that through 4 different faculty cohorts, they created 24 new gen ed courses that again are really kind of putting the best foot forward in terms of meeting students in their interests. I'll show you some examples in a second. And we worked with them to learn how students were responding to this. So these are some of the courses that foregrounded experiential learning, which was a major emphasis of the project. And you can see from these course titles that they connect with things important to students: popular music in America, meditation traditions of Asia, connecting poetry and healthcare, the history of hip hop and hip hop as history, which, having participated in such a class, is a really rich topic for very deep intellectual engagement with major issues in our culture and history and economy. And then looking at film festivals, you also see this ad for one of these courses on the right, and I'm not expecting you to read this small text, but just to note that, Who Tells Your Story is the pitch, Music, Culture, Society, and Self is the title, and right there at the bottom, emphasizing in all caps, the carrot for students. This fulfills your humanities requirement in the gen ed. So that's something to get students foot in the door who might not normally be interested in taking such a course. There was also, parallel to this, an effort to form a separate cohort of faculty who worked to incorporate career-based learning skills into existing courses. Here you see some examples of those. Some of these titles were modified with the injection of more career-based learning. And there was, in developing these courses, there was collaborative workshops with career services staff to really do this to a thorough degree with the expertise from career services. And this is how students responded. They say that this, across the board, whether they are humanities majors or not, the vast majority of students in the course, as you'll see in a second, are not humanities majors in these courses. And they, across the board, they're saying that this helps them see how the humanities can help them in their careers. By taking the humanities out into the community, by injecting career prep content into humanities courses, they're able to see how this works much more. And the enthusiasm degree in terms of, is a little bit different for the humanities majors, but basically it's the same percentage of students agreeing, 86%. Now, just looking at just the students who stated that their primary reason for taking the course was to fulfill a gen ed. Most of these are non-humanities majors, or you also see some that are undeclared, a small number of humanities majors. And then if you take just the non-humanities majors, 78% of them agreed that this experience made them want to take more classes in the humanities. And some even said that it made them sort of think differently about their career paths. And so, lastly, I'll just show this slide. This is an aggregate slide. So this data is taken from a lot of different projects that we partnered with, various initiatives that are innovative in the ways that we've just described. And you just see, the types of questions we've been asking, and that it's not uncommon to get these really strong responses where by meeting students where they are, taking their concerns seriously, really can shift their perception of what the humanities can offer. So I will pause at this moment to invite questions before we move into the next part of our presentation. I'm going to stop sharing briefly, and I will check in with the doc where my colleagues have been processing any questions that come in. Okay, so we have a great comment about non-humanities majors also having more things to show. That's a really great point. I know there's a lot of emphasis right now on portfolio development that's across the undergraduate experience. We'll talk a little bit about some examples of how folks have done that in terms of actually working with career services to do an inventory of what are the real skills and what are the sort of work products that they've been able to produce through the course of their studies, and how can they really articulate that in a way to employers that they really care about. So agree, that's a really important issue, and we'll dig into that a little bit further. So great comment here. Sorry, that was from Kate Torno. This one's from Anthony Arcieri, about the chicken and egg situation of, should we be focusing more on increasing sort of job placement, improving job placement for humanities majors, or on bringing students into the humanities. And I think it's definitely a both and. So that's why you'll see in some of the examples we show at the end here, we're really interested in promoting both approaches on the front end and the back end. So engaging these concerns about career prospects in gateway courses, in recruiting events, in early stage advising processes, but also in the capstone. Also getting students to participate in career prep earlier and more often as they make their way through the undergraduate experience, because for humanities majors whose options are much more open-ended, which we'll talk more about, it's especially important for them to be working on this as they go through their studies. But they're often the students who are the same reasons maybe that they choose humanities majors in the face of a lot of noise. So that's definitely a really good point. We have another comment from Joy Carr. An ongoing challenge for our university is ensuring that students can take enticing courses while still remaining degree pursuing for federal and state aid. Interesting. This is an issue that this is the kind of issue that we would love to learn more from you all about. So that's it. So it sounds like that there are in some cases aid restrictions when students take courses that are not directly tied to their degree. That is something that we would love to learn more. And then we have one from William Roberts. One thing I would be interested in learning more about is any particular suggested strategies to encourage men from any background and low-income students to consider the humanities, especially when the national narrative encourages lower-income students to major in more practical majors and minors that have a more obvious and direct tie to jobs immediately after graduation. That's an excellent point, and this is something that we've really looked at. Is like we have a report coming out next month where we will on expanding access to the humanities, where we think about that in a really expansive way, including gender diversity. And so we've looked at examples of, for instance, a digital narrative and interactive design program at Pitt. It's a collaboration between computer science and English that has drawn more male students into English, drawn more Asian students into English. And so we're looking at that in all kinds of ways of how we can make the humanities more accessible to students who are currently less inclined to pursue that. We also document a lot of projects that have been successful in engaging first generation students, which we'll look at a little bit later. So thanks so much for these great questions. Please keep them coming. I am going to move it back into my presentation. I'm going to share our resources, and then I'm going to turn back to you all in a moment and ask for your feedback on these resources I'm about to share. So parallel to the research we've been doing about what works to attract more students to the humanities and make them more appealing to a broader range of students, we've also been developing case-making resources that debunk myths about humanities majors' career prospects. And I say majors here, but we're also starting to think more and more, as I'll share, about making that case for students who are not going to be humanities majors about like why the humanities are helpful for them in their careers, even as a set of electives or, even better, a minor. So we created this toolkit of arguments for studying the humanities. You see the URL there at the bottom, which I think Cassie is also going to share here in the chat.
You are not sharing your screen correctly.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I missed that. Thank you for catching that. Okay. Okay, here we are. Okay, so this is the Study of the Humanities Toolkit. So the first argument we make is it's just a simple argument that majors thrive. Humanities majors who love what they're studying, they thrive. They enjoy what they're doing. And there's also several measures that you can look at where they're outperforming their peers, whether you're looking at different kinds of tests of critical thinking and writing skills that folks have done, and also graduate entrance exams. So humanities majors scoring higher on the MCAT, on the LSAT, and gaining entrance to those programs at a higher rate. Valued skills. So here we look at employer surveys. ACNU regularly does surveys of employers. NACE, the National Association of Counselors and Employers, also does regular surveys of employers about the skills that they see as valuable. And basically what we're, I'll share more detail, but, just showing how in demand these skills are among a wide variety of career fields. The third is really just kind of debunking the sort of you're going to work at Starbucks and live in your parents' basement sort of narrative that we've maybe heard before. So, there's a sense among a lot of people that humanities majors are particularly behind the 8 ball when it comes to career success and employment. And that is not what the data shows. It actually shows comparable levels of employment, comparable salaries, right in the average range for college graduates, which means that they're fully benefiting from the wage premium that college graduates enjoy far and above what those who lack a college degree earn in our society. And also evidence that they do increasingly well over the long haul. So we need to not just look 2-3 years out. We need to be looking at an entire career and earning potential and leadership potential over the long haul. To that point, we highlight well-known leaders in sectors ranging from science and medicine to business to government to entertainment, all kinds of industries where major leaders have strong backgrounds in the humanities. We, of course, talk about the benefits for life, which are always kind of professional skills at the same time. So there's a lot of evidence about building empathy through studying the humanities. And empathy is obviously something that's really valuable in your personal life. It's equally valuable in your professional life in terms of working effectively with other people and understanding where they're coming from. And then finally, this argument about the future of work, where we're basically challenging a lot of preconceived notions that people have about how humanities skills will fare in the job market of the future. And here we're not drawing on our own sort of internal arguments. We're drawing on the labor market forecasts of experts at Deloitte and the World Economic Forum, who have no particular investment in the humanities, but what they're seeing when they try to project what is the 2030 job market going to look like, you've probably heard these themes before, that automation is going to, and the development of artificial intelligence is going to create even more turmoil in the job market than we already see. So the cycles of industries growing and dying will increase, become more rapid. And that within this context of rapid change, transferable skills are hugely valuable. The idea that a 4-year undergraduate degree in this century can go the distance in terms of sustaining an entire career is largely a pipe dream for most students. That they're going to have to be able to adapt, they're going to have to change their careers, and they're going to have to increasingly differentiate themselves from what computers can do and handle complex challenges, and that the humanities actually play to the strengths that are going to be most valued as the job market evolves. So, just to connect a couple dots there in terms of just a couple of examples of the data, this is the data on how employers across a wide variety of industries prioritize these skills. These skills that have clear connection to humanities education, oral communication, critical thinking, and analytical reasoning, working with diverse groups, ethical judgment and decision-making, written communication, complex problem solving. These are consistently at the top of the lists in these surveys in terms of the skills endorsed by the widest number of professionals. as being seen as valuable across a wide variety of industries. And here's the data. This is a little bit of a complicated correlation based on a complex analysis that these researchers did. But here's just basically a prediction based on their metrics that things like social perceptiveness, complex problem solving, and critical thinking are actually going to gain more value on the job market than things like technology design, programming, and mathematical skills, which of course will continue to be important and valuable. They're already very valuable. So there's a high baseline there for many of these things, but that the idea that trend is going to accelerate where those things are more and more important, and these humanities skills are less and less important, is not what the experts are saying. So we've had this toolkit for several years. These narratives are stubborn, and so we're continuing to adapt our arguments to try to help address these concerns. So first, I already mentioned, we're trying to adapt our tools where we're not always pushing the idea of humanities majors, but also articulating the value of the humanities for all students, regardless of major. Also, just putting more emphasis on challenging the whole notion that a college major is a credential that determines your professional path. It's hard to get firm data on this, but most of the estimates, I've seen put it somewhere in the 70s in terms of most people do work directly related to their college major in a linear way. And so that this is the vast majority, that people view humanities as this special case of it being an indirect path, but actually the indirect path is the norm. We've engaged a lot with career services folks and with NACE leadership, and we see this as reinforcing a lot of the arguments coming from that corner in terms of downplaying trying to kind of counter the over preoccupation with a major as a credential that students often come to college with, and parents as well, and instead emphasizing that it's really about the resume you're building through your experiences, through your parallel experiences to your curriculum that matters the most to employers and that is most predictive of successful postgraduate transitions, more so than the area of study. I mentioned the grad school entrance argument for students who are planning to pursue graduate school. Again, the evidence shows a humanities major is more likely to get into medical school, is more likely to score higher on the MCAT and also get into medical school at a higher rate than a biology major. And so this runs in of course, you have to do your prereqs in the sciences, of course, to be a candidate for that. But actually, that differentiates you as a candidate to also study the humanities. And then finally, just challenging the things like the college scorecard that are based on 2 to 3 years out measures of income, and that this is just a bad metric for measuring the return on investment of an entire life and career from a college education, which it should be understood as an investment in one's life, not in the couple years following graduation. This is just an example of kind of how we're putting these things together. So this is another, it's a little bit of a complicated metric, but this was another of these kind of labor market expert analyses where they put a metric on the transferability of these skills. And so, our point here is for most, career success depends not on their mastery of the specific content they studied in college, but rather on their capacity to acquire new knowledge and skills on the job. This is something that humanities majors excel at because the skills are so broadly applicable, more so than those from a technical education, which may have a limited shelf life in terms of things becoming obsolete more quickly in the job of the 21st century. This is just an example of one of these sources that, again, is coming from outside of the humanities. This is a report by Microsoft making the case for, seeing the effects of AI and automation as actually increasing demand for this kind of an education. So just to go a little bit further into some of these, so one of the things we're doing is, the averageness of humanities majors salaries is not, particularly impressive. It's also not as troubling as the myths and narratives and the culture would suggest. But we've started to kind of try to talk about this as, what is hidden within that average earning potential for a college graduate, again, which is far above what someone who does not pursue a college degree can expect. So the first point, and this one comes from Rob Townsend, who I see is here today with the humanities indicators, that humanities majors are overrepresented in every career field outside of STEM. So in other words, unless a career field requires a particular technical education, humanities majors are always disproportionately represented. And so, this is everything from, the vast economy of general business services, financial services, the legal profession, everything outside of things that require that technical. So humanities majors, it's not, you may have heard said you can do anything. Well, you may not be able to do anything, but you can do the vast majority of things with a humanities major. And people do. The other point is that, and then, above here is that the numbers come out average, but if you parse them a little bit more, you see things like more than a quarter of those who earn humanities bachelor's degrees but do not pursue graduate degrees end up earning six figures, right? So humanities majors are able to pursue high earning jobs and succeed in those careers. But the average is also dragged down by the fact that many humanities majors go into mission-driven careers that are undervalued and underpaid in today's society. So humanities majors are overrepresented in the nonprofit and education sectors. An important point is that it's not that they're all teachers. Many of them work in education in all kinds of ways. To give an example, my job, which is very niche, is also in another sense a very typical humanities major job, in the sense that I work in a nonprofit organization that does advocacy work. Humanities majors are in all kinds of advocacy work, devoted to all kinds of causes. And then in my case, it's also connected to education. But it's a misnomer that to interpret all the high proportion of humanities majors who are in the education sector, assuming that they are teachers. That's not the case. But the fact is that many of these careers aren't highly compensated, particularly at the entry level, which does not change our need for them and their value to our society. And what it does mean is that, that 2 to 3 year metric of ROI is not a reliable figure. There's so many examples you can think of a humanities major going into a great professional opportunity in a field that they are committed to, that they're going to succeed in, that they're not going to get paid a very high salary right out of college. And just challenging the foundation of this bad faith argument that the way to measure an individual's contribution to society is their income. I mean, it is an incredibly individualistic and myopic way to measure one's contribution. And these careers that humanities majors are overrepresented in are hugely important for our society. They're important for our democracy in this moment when that is very fragile. And so there's lots of other ways to talk about the payoff of a degree, of a career, of a life. So the second resource I'd like to share is a podcast we've developed called "What Are You Going to Do with That?" And so this is these are humanities majors' career stories. And you see everyday folks, diverse backgrounds, how studying the humanities help prepare them for fulfilling careers. This is on all of the podcast platforms. And I'm going to play you a little clip here just to give you a taste of what these folks are saying about how their humanities background has benefited them in a wide variety of fields. Oops, sorry. Apologies. It's going again.
Scott, the sound isn't coming through for us if it is for you. Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. We can move on. So you can check out that trailer that I was playing on again on any Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. Here's some examples of some of the episodes in terms of the titles. You see the folks' images. You know, these are from the first season, which that trailer was from. So in all of these cases, you know, we're really just in the first season, we're really just trying to make a clear case that, you know, this can really be a strong foundation for career success and fulfillment. And in the second season, we've kind of gone beyond that. Kind of, you can do well, and also that you can do a lot of good as well with the humanities background. So here you just see a table representing the folks that we featured in the second season, all of them doing pro-social work, whether as lawyers, as filmmakers, as folks working in disaster relief nonprofits, as a physician with cultural competency in a challenging environment, as a founder of a social enterprise, as a podcast producer who promotes the value of museums and cultural organizations, as somebody working in philanthropy and community development, and you know, or even a kind of particular combination of passions in a integrated career that involves multiple sources of income and multiple kinds of work. So I will now pause here. I've seen there's been some questions coming through, and I will take a look at that while we invite you to share some feedback on these resources. So we'll be sharing in the chat these links to something called Pigeonhole. And so you'll see that these are for, here I can come out of the share here. These are for each of the four groups represented. So we have advising, admissions, and career services. We also noted that a number of humanities people signed up. So we have a separate group for you, whether you're from a scholarly society or working on campus, faculty, staff, or administrator. And so if you could please take a look at that and open up the questions in that part one on the page. We'll get to part two after my next portion of the presentation. And just quickly share your feedback on, you know, who, if you see these resources as valuable and from whom, and what additional resources might be helpful to you in making the case to students of why studying the humanities can be a good bet for their future. Okay. Thanks for taking the time to do that, and we will do a little bit more reportage on what you've shared after this next segment. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my presentation here, and now I am going to share some models for collaboration that we've learned about through our research on what is working to attract more students to the humanities. So this is a kind of a broad one from the University of Arizona, which has been the most successful university in the country, arguably, in growing humanities enrollments. The College of Humanities has grown steadily and significantly over the course of the period of decline that we looked at the beginning. And one of the ways that they've done this is by investing in marketing and recruitment from the College of Humanities itself, and in partnering with advisors, with communications staff, with admissions to implement recruitment projects and events. And one of the things that's cool about how they're doing this is they're actually incentivizing faculty, staff, and students to get involved. So they have this Humanities Ambassadors program that mobilizes undergrads as advocates. They have a faculty recruitment training program and funding to support recruitment projects that faculty want to pursue. And then importantly, they also identify one faculty point person for recruitment in every single department, so that that department sees that as valuable work and supports their colleague in spearheading it on behalf of the department. Now I'm going to get into a couple more specific ones with the different constituencies represented here. So this is from Colby College, the Arts and Humanities Center there created these short films to highlight its most engaging programming. So these include humanities lab courses that are high on experiential learning and applied approaches. Also their annual theme programming, which is a long series of events around a big topic like human/nature past. So they partnered with admissions to embed these short films and messages targeted at students with specific interests. And these films have been downloaded hundreds of thousands of times. And the admissions office saw them as really valuable for their work in promoting Colby as an option for students. Really good content for that. And it was a really great opportunity for humanities folks to share what they're doing on a much broader platform. This one is from James Madison University, the history department, when a new dean of admissions was hired there and charged with emphasizing recruitment of underserved students as part of a broader platform from upper administration. The history department responded by collaborating to initiate programming to help first generation students acclimate to the community and to get them more interested in history. Importantly, at the same time, they did a massive overhaul of their curriculum to make the value of studying history more legible to first generation students. So they moved away from disciplinary conventions and geographic surveys and period-based requirements to instead build their requirements around applying history to publicly engaged projects and connecting it to the various curriculum. And while they were doing all this over a 3-year period, they grew their majors by 21%, doubled their minors, and first gen students accounted for 60% of the growth in this major. So really suggests that this was really successful. I'm going to skip this one real quick, just in the interest of time. Move on to a couple of advisor examples. So this one, I sort of framed it giving students permission to own their humanities identity. This is, different from a centralized advising approach where the University of Oklahoma History Department had its own advisor who spearheaded these efforts, who's a real go-getter. And she, while she was doing this, they saw an increase in majors, an increase in minors. Basically what she did was she, using institutional data, she noted that there was a critical mass of students who were struggling in over-enrolled business and STEM majors, and while they were succeeding in history electives, and they were seeking out history electives. There was a pattern of history elective taking, and there was success there, and there was struggle in their major. And so basically, she created these class presentations and also emails that sought to just give them permission to follow their muse And a big part of this, so she did this through social media outreach too, with the history club, and appealing to students' intrinsic interests, but importantly, using the career pathways content to show them that this was not, that they could make this choice with confidence, and that it was not compromising their future. And I think that this example really turns the whole kind of thing we read at the beginning about retention, and the retention logic being to discourage major switching, to discourage double majors, on its head a little bit. Because we've heard of this, at other institutions where there's programs that students are pushed into who are not necessarily gifted in these areas. They're not necessarily interested in these areas. They're pushed into them for pragmatic reasons, and they're not always succeeding. And so sometimes the retention win is actually to just bless that student's transition from that over-enrolled program into something that they are passionate about, that they're good at, that they can succeed in. This is another collaboration with history at the University of Oregon. Again, a time when they were growing like crazy amidst decline at other institutions. And the outreach to advisors they pointed to is really important. They gave them all these careers for history majors pamphlets, and collaborated to avoid what they call unforced scheduling errors, to make sure that they weren't limiting enrollments by with scheduling errors, while also working to put their best foot forward with their gen ed, creating a lot of gen ed courses, getting their senior faculty to take them, renaming them to increase their appeal, so inventing America instead of U.S. history to the Civil War, and lots of ripped from the headlines curriculum innovation. So they view these as all really reinforcing each other. And then finally, a couple career services. I'll just quickly mention the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign Liberal Arts and Sciences Career Center is a great resource. This is a humanities faculty member who created this center. And so it's just really, they're really addressing students' anxieties head on, and finding that's really helpful in getting them to engage in this process earlier and more frequently. We've also seen this happen without such a structure, where just getting faculty and career services together, in this case to develop materials, to chart career pathways, just forming those relationships can result in things like tripling students' participation in career fairs and evidence-based career counseling, and also improving advising to incorporate more career prep into that. So I'm out of time to share these. I want to make sure we get to so opportunity to share your feedback. So we'll get into the pigeonholes now. So if you could go back into those and proceed on to the questions for part 2. All right, and you can keep those responses coming in. I have my colleagues here with me from NHA monitoring each of these, and I welcome you as you analyze them as they're coming in, to share your observations of what folks are sharing in terms of things that you're doing on your campuses to cultivate this kind of collaboration. So let's start with Rennie. Would you be willing to kick us off with what the humanities folks are saying?
Sure. So people overall, they rated the usefulness of these resources as being really interesting. They really love the data. They said this would be useful for basically anyone, even spread there. And as far as good things going on campus, people generally noted, this is for the humanities people, generally noted low level of collaboration, about 3 to 4 between humanities staff and admin. But there were some good options mentioned, like a humanities internship coordinator, a career readiness summer working group for arts and humanities students, service learning courses, stuff like that. So really interesting options.
Great, thanks. And thanks for all those responses, folks. Let's go on to Sangeeta. Could you share about what you are seeing coming in from admissions, folks?
Right, of course. From the admissions folks, at least 30 point, so people majorly voted for students benefiting the most from these resources, followed closely by parents and admission staff, and how these different audiences would benefit. There were some great responses which have garnered a lot of votes. People did say that it would make them better informed, allow them to make better informed and confident decisions, and that admission staff would gain research-backed talking points, which students can access, these different resources to see how humanities can help them, and also to kind of balance out the emphasis on majors that link directly to a specific career path. So kind of great discussions going on with what students especially and faculty and staff can do with these resources.
Great. B, would you like to share?
Sure, I had advising, and similar to what Rennie said, there was a sort of equal distribution of where people thought the resources would be helpful, and some good suggestions about other things that would be useful. One in particular was talking points specifically targeted at students to engage with other students, so that they could make the case for the humanities to others. And then in terms of collaborations, we got about a 5.71 average for collaboration, which I thought was a pretty good number. And some great suggestions about things that work on different campuses. The one that got 9 upvotes was that during the registration period, department chairs in the humanities often send our team, this is advising again, a list of under-enrolled courses that we can promote to student majors. So that conversation seems to be helpful for student advisors.
Great. Steve?
Yep, so I had career services and also pretty equal distribution of what audiences would benefit in terms of specific ways they benefit. A lot of votes for helping faculty incorporate career readiness into courses in terms of collaboration on campus. Career services actually rated collaboration higher than other groups have so far right now at 5.92. And again, as with others, lots of great ideas, specific career prep workshops, extra credit assignments to encourage students to participate in job exploration, job fairs, other kinds of things as well are some of the suggestions.
Great. Well, we are out of time, and thank you all so much for this feedback. We really value it. We're going to be digging into this more deeply. We hope this can be the beginning of a conversation rather than the end of one. And so please feel free to reach out to us. If you're interested in learning more, we will be having many more conversations like this at our annual meeting in March in DC, so Cassie just posted a link in the chat. But please do not hesitate to reach out with further ideas, feedback, thoughts for us to consider. We really appreciate all of you being here and your interest in collaborating on this important issue. So thank you so much.